Good evening and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center and our coverage of Boeing's crew flight test. I'm Brandy Dean with NASA.
And I'm Lauren Brennicke with Boeing. Starliner safely departed the International Space Station and is on its way back to Earth.
Starliner is making its return autonomously tonight without NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams after a decision to return without crew was made during a flight test readiness review last week. But the team here in Mission Control will be watching over Starliner over the course of the next hour and a half as the spacecraft fires its engines to drop back into Earth's atmosphere and make its way down for a landing in New Mexico at about 11 p.m. Central or midnight Eastern.
The team here is led tonight by Flight Director Rick Henfling with weather assistance from Flight Director Mike Lammers. Henfling is just under 7 minutes away from polling the flight controllers here in the room on their readiness for Starliner to perform its deorbit burn at Starliner's landing zone. Teams in Florida, Houston, and New Mexico have been monitoring the spacecraft, famously undocked from the International Space Station at 5:04 p.m. time while flying 260 miles over central China.
NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams National Space Station in June as part of NASA's Boeing crew flight test lifted off a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket from Complex 31 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. That was 5th. They arrived at the International Space Station on June 6th. During that June 6th rendezvous, NASA and Boeing identified helium leaks and experienced issues with the Starliner's reaction control thrusters as the spacecraft approached the space station. Since then, engineering teams have completed a significant amount of work collecting and reviewing data, conducting flight and ground testing, hosting independent reviews with agency propulsion experts, and developing various return contingency plans. Uncertainty and lack of expert concurrence did not meet the agency's safety and performance requirements for human spaceflight, thus prompting NASA's decision to return Boeing Starliner spacecraft to Earth without the astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams, aboard. The uncrewed return allows NASA to continue gathering test data on Starliner during its upcoming flight home, while also not accepting additional risk for the crew. Wilmore and Williams, meanwhile, have formally joined the Expedition 7172 crew and are going to remain at the space station conducting science experiments and helping with maintenance through February 2025. They're going to fly home aboard a Dragon spacecraft with 2 other crew members assigned to the agency's SpaceX Crew 9 mission. That is NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. On Thursday afternoon, the hatches were closed between Starliner and the International Space Station. And earlier today at 5:04 p.m. Central, the docking hooks released Starliner, allowing it to separate and begin moving away from the space station and into place for its journey home. You can see that video from earlier today playing here.
We saw a beautiful display of Starliner's thrusters there.
Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams also had some words to say for the teams here on the ground as Starliner was making its way away from the space station.
Station Houston, space to ground 2 for Starliner undock status.
Go ahead, we're with you.
Hey, Sunny, both the Starliner and ISS flight control teams have pulled go for undock at this time. The expected undock time is 22:04.
Okay, copy, 22:04. Hey, we're just looking at the flight control roster, and wow, it is the all-star team. You guys, it is the time to bring Calypso home. You have got this. We have your backs, and you've got this. Bring her back to Earth. Good luck.
Sunny and Butch, this is Chloe. Just on behalf of the entire MO team, I know the other flight control teams around the building, we thank you for your endless support over the years. We've enjoyed every training event and every meeting. We remember every setback and every revelation with you. The teams on the ground have worked countless hours over the last few weeks, months, and for a group of us, years to bring Calypso back, and we're ready to do that today. We wish you the best of luck in your increment, and Sunny, I will make sure the right people have your coming home song ready to play on Space to Ground when it's time for you guys to come home. Good luck, and thank you.
Wonderful comments, Flight. We appreciate that, and we agree. Many years of great enjoyment, simming together, playing together, and being involved with each other's lives, and it's been special. Bring it home.
Cappy, thank you, and have a good evening.
That again was a conversation recorded earlier today between astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore talking with the Starliner flight director at the time of undocking, Chloe Meering. Since that undocking, when Starliner and the space station were flying 260 miles above central China, Starliner has been steadily increasing the distance between it and the space station, ensuring that it will be able to get into space and to place to perform a 10:17 p.m. Central deorbit burn. Now in about 20 minutes. While it has been moving away, the flight controllers here on the ground took the opportunity to perform a few tests of Starliner's thrusters. During the test, the crew module's 12 small reaction control system thrusters, one of the jets, didn't fire when commanded. The reaction control system thrusters on the crew module are used to steer Starliner as it makes its way back down to Earth after the service module has been jettisoned. Because those 12 jets are divided into two redundant strings of 6, Starliner only uses one string during normal operations. So although this means a slight loss of redundancy, it shouldn't keep Starliner from getting through re-entry and landing as expected.
Yeah, and Starliner has plenty of redundancy with this part of the prop system on the capsule, so no impact to the deorbit burn or reentry, and it's not required for flight rules. The team also tested 10 of the 28 reaction control system jets in the service module after undocking, and they all performed as expected.
And here on the ground, the team just gave their go officially to Rick Henfling, today's flight director, meaning that tonight's landing of Starliner is on. That, again, is scheduled to happen, touchdown at 11 p.m. Central Time or midnight Eastern Time. Once again, flight director Rick Henfling has gotten a go from Starliner's for Starliner's deorbit burn from all of the flight controllers watching over the spacecraft's return tonight. And that again means we are officially on for Starliner's return to Earth at about 11 p.m. Central Time or midnight Eastern. The deorbit burn at 10:17 p.m. Central Time is now just 17 minutes away. That'll be a 59-second firing of 4 of Starliner's orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters on Starliner's service module. And joining us live from Starliner's landing zone with White Sands at White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico, our colleagues Leah Cheshire from NASA Public Affairs and Boeing's Josh Barrett. Leah and Josh, how is it going out there?
Thanks, Brandy. It is going well out here. We are out here in White Sands. The weather right now is about 75 degrees and very light winds, approximately 6 miles per hour. This looks like potentially a picture from earlier today. It is quite dark out here at this point. We have a beautiful view of the stars, and we are lined up in the convoy getting ready to roll.
That's right, Leah. So I've been out here for both of Starliner's previous landings. The first one was very cold. The second one was quite warm, and this one feels just about right. We're following along with two command vehicles. We've got the MLCC, or the Mobile Landing Control Center. They're tied in down in Mission Control in Houston with the people that you're seeing on your screen right now. We also have the MDTV, that's the Mobile Data and Tracking Vehicle, and on top of that, it's got a suite of optics on top. There's an infrared camera and two visible cameras, one of them with a telescopic focus. So those will be the first things that we'll be seeing Starliner with here from the landing zone, and you should be seeing those on your screens as well. And Leah's got a few more things that she'll talk about that should get some cameras on Starliner as well.
Yeah, especially the WB-57, NASA's plane. That took off just a few hours ago, just as we were heading out here to the landing site. So we arrived here at about 6 p.m. local time, which is mountain time. And since then have been getting ready, lining up, doing communications checks between the various teams, and just getting ready to eventually drive out to the landing site once Starliner comes down. So it is a sea of white gypsum sand out here. And teams are continuing to just prepare as soon as we get into that deorbit burn. So they are actually in a huddle right now, talking through some of the next steps for tonight, getting ready to come and join us here in the convoy as we await to see the deorbit burn. So with that, right now, we are going to turn it back over to you, Brandy and Lauren. We are going to stick around, though, and cannot wait to see Starliner coming straight across the sky. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leah and Josh. We are hoping to get some good views from where you guys are at later today.
Now, once we make that final burn to get out of orbit today, it'll take about 45 minutes for Starliner to reach its destination. Again, White Sands Space Harbor, New Mexico, where we just spoke with our colleagues from. Starliner is currently flying with its solar arrays pointed toward the sun, recharging the internal batteries to keep its systems powered through landing. The orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters, or what we call OMACs, will fire for about a minute to conduct the deorbit burn. That maneuver slows the spacecraft down from orbital velocities and allows it to start falling back to Earth in a head-down position. At the end of that deorbit burn, Starliner angles itself for re-entry.
The deorbit burn is just the first in a series of milestones we're going to be ticking off tonight. To give you the full rundown, deorbit burn is scheduled for 10:17 p.m. Central. As we said, we just got the go for that a few minutes ago. It's going to be followed by the separation of the crew module from the service module at 10:20 p.m., and the crew module will then continue on its own. At 10:45 p.m., Starliner will begin to feel the effects of the Earth's atmosphere again for the first time since its ascent in June. And a few minutes later, around 10:47, the heat from Starliner's reentry will become so intense that that plasma will begin to form around the spacecraft, causing a blackout in communications with Starliner for about 4.5 minutes. Once Starliner clears that blackout period, things will begin to happen very quickly.
Yeah, so then up next at 10:56, when Starliner is about 4.3 miles above Earth, the spacecraft will be done with the forward heat shield that is at the top of the capsule that helped protect it through re-entry, and it will jettison it to make way for the parachutes that are stored underneath. And then almost immediately, those parachutes will begin to deploy. First with two smaller drogue parachutes that are meant to take the edge off Starliner's speed. They open up in stages over the course of about 28 seconds. And then at 10:57 p.m., when Starliner is about 6 miles up, the drogue parachutes are released and 3 main parachutes are deployed. They also open in stages over about 16 seconds, but they stay with the spacecraft all the way until touchdown. And again, we are expecting that touchdown to come at 11 p.m. Central. Just before the touchdown, however, at 10:58 p.m., Starliner also sheds its base heat shield at the bottom of the capsule to make way for the inflation of 6 landing airbags hidden underneath it, and those will cushion the vehicle as it lands in New Mexico's desert.
It's probably worth mentioning that we do not have video from Starliner. If you think back to June on its ascent and journey to the International Space Station, it's not able to send video down when it's not connected to the space station, so we won't be getting in-flight views from it, but we do have several cameras out at the landing site as well as some aircraft in the area that we are hoping to get some views from. But of course, it is going to be pretty dark out in the desert at night, so they may be infrared or black and white views, but hopefully we'll get some good camera views to show you.
And we're taking a live look now from the landing site, but the shot is quite dark at the moment. You can see just a few lights blinking there. Hopefully, as we get closer to the ground, as Starliner gets closer down, we will have some better shots. The landing and recovery teams have been out in the desert preparing for the spacecraft's return for several days. I've been speaking with them to catch up on some of the preps that have been taking place. They ran through a full mission dress rehearsal where they practiced the landing and recovery operation with all the different groups and functions. And they've also been keeping a close eye on the wind direction to establish the best recovery zone out at White Sands. They've even sent up some weather balloons to check the wind speeds.
Tracking vehicles out there are equipped with cameras, so the team has been calibrating those. And again, although we don't expect any views from Starliner on its way down, we're hoping to get some good ones from those tracking cameras as well as aircraft in the area. We plan to have the WB-57 getting views while it is about 16,000 feet above the ground until the drogue parachutes deploy. And then at about 6,000 feet, we hope to see views from a Cessna in the area. And this is actually a current view of the Cessna as it makes its way out to the landing site, White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. And this is a shot from one of the ground cameras that we have on site. So again, although it is dark there, we are hoping to see some good views.
And in the last few hours, the teams there on the ground have been at the holding area, loading up their vehicles, doing last-minute checks, making sure all the equipment is ready to go, and then shortly they'll begin moving into place to watch Starliner make its final approach. And then once Starliner lands, teams will move closer in a very strategic way. They will first stop at about the 500-foot mark away from the spacecraft, and then they'll move in closer to the 150-foot mark while ground teams safe the vehicle.
That first team on site with Starliner will be what we call the gold team. They start recovery operations by performing what's called a sniff test, where they use sensors to check for hydrazine, one of the propellants that Starliner uses. They'll be wearing protective gear known as hazmat suits to prevent exposure to hypergolic propellants. Hydrazine is used as propellant, and if it turns into a vapor, it can be toxic. After the sniff test, they will notify the rest of the convoy when it's safe to approach, and then they're going to check the winds, make sure the entire landing and recovery team is staged uprange from the direction the wind is blowing for added protection.
Now, everyone out there is part of a different color team, and they wear a vest with that color, so it's very obvious who does what. So the next step is the silver team, and their first job is to ground the spacecraft. Starliner will be powered down, but there could be some residual electricity. So before anyone can touch it, they will ground it and discharge it.
Teams here on the ground are reporting that everything is getting into good configuration for the deorbit burn. That's now just about 6.5 minutes away. Going on with what we were saying, we also will have the blue team that documents everything that's going on at the landing site. These are photographers from both Boeing and NASA who have situational awareness cameras. And again, here's a current view of those teams all ready to deploy at landing.
Yeah, that's the holding site that we were mentioning. And then, of course, you can see the mountains there in the background in this black and white view. Now, the green team hooks up the HVAC trailers to Starliner to get cooling on it, but their first job is to put up an environmental enclosure on the spacecraft, and that enclosure looks a lot like a big inflatable. It wraps around the vehicle to get cool air around it and make sure the critical systems don't overheat.
Then the red team opens the hatch. That is mostly Boeing Fire and Rescue. They will back up the mobile access platform to Starliner's hatch, giving the team access.
And Starliner will be bringing back more than 900 pounds of cargo, including a nitrogen oxygen recharge system, or what we call NORS tank, that NASA will service and refill for future space station needs. The teams will unload that cargo before Starliner heads back to Florida.
Just over 5 minutes to go now until tonight's 10:17 p.m. Central Time deorbit burn. Team here on the ground reports that Starliner has gotten into the right attitude, kind of the right way it's pointing for that burn. So everything is looking good. We're on track for landing at 11 p.m. Central, midnight Eastern. With just a couple minutes or 4 minutes left to go until the deorbit burn, we're going to check in once again with the landing team and Leah Cheshire and Josh Barrett.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, we are out here just waiting in the convoy area. Now, most of the team is taking part in a safety briefing right now as we prepare to watch the deorbit burn and the reentry and then move in toward the spacecraft. Like you mentioned, it's really dark out here. Josh and I were just able to take in the really beautiful sight of the Milky Way. It's so dark. So once the capsule starts to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, we expect to have a pretty good view of the streak as that plasma builds up around the capsule itself.
That's right. We should be seeing it come just over the southwest horizon, right through the saddle of kind of the mountains that are just overlooking the mountain range here. And remembering back to OFT1, kind of the view that we should be having here is that we'll hear the sonic booms as well after we see kind of that plasma envelope. And then pretty quickly afterward, it is pretty remarkable how quickly it does end up over our heads. We'll see the flashes from the mortars, which deploy those forward heat shield parachutes, which take the forward heat shield off. Then we start hearing those mortars, and then the parachutes start to deploy. And then it's kind of slow motion from there as it drifts down.
And we're seeing a lot of movement as teams have just completed that safety briefing here. So they're now all walking to join us at the convoy. So it looks like we are just a few minutes away from the deorbit burn, and the show is really getting on the road soon. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to you in Houston.
We are just over 2 minutes away from the deorbit burn. At this point, Starliner has moved well away from the International Space Station and quite a few kilometers ahead of it as well. We had a number of smaller burns to ensure that Starliner was at a safe distance away from the space station before it performs the deorbit burn that will bring it out of orbit and on its journey back to Earth.
And Flight Director Rick Henfling and his team expect Starliner's orbital maneuvering attitude control thrusters, also called OMACs, to fire around 10:17 Central Time, pushing the spacecraft out of its orbital flight path and onto its journey home. This deorbit burn will set us up for a touchdown time of about 11 p.m. Central or 10 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time out there in White Sands, New Mexico.
Once it's there, control teams in Houston will begin powering off Starliner's radiators and solar arrays as the spacecraft now has enough power to get home, and sublimators will be taking over cooling. They use water to cool the cabin. Starliner is also, as we said, now in the correct attitude for performing the deorbit burn, and at this point, the service module and crew capsule are still attached to each other. 4 of the service module's 12 aft-facing orbital maneuvering and attitude control engines are going to be powering the deorbit burn, allowing them to separate safely.
And those engines are each 1,500-pound thrusters, meaning this burn will take about 6,000 pounds of thrust, slowing Starliner from its current orbital velocity and bringing it back to Earth's atmosphere for a smooth landing. The small reaction control system, or RCS thrusters, assist here in holding Starliner in the correct attitude. During this test flight, our teams ran roughly 1 million computer model simulations showing all the different thruster combinations possible for a safe return to Earth today.
Just 20 seconds now until the burn starts. It'll last 59 seconds. And again, you be firing those orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters. Four orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters on Starliner's service module are now firing, slowing Starliner down as the capsule begins its journey back to Earth. This will take about 59 seconds to complete. We're hearing all thrusters firing well so far. You can see here those representation of those thrusters firing. Starliner is maintaining its attitude, and as those large orbital maneuvering thrusters are firing, smaller reaction control system thrusters are also working, keeping the spacecraft in the correct position for the burn. Still looking good. And we did see the deorbit burn cut off successfully. Teams here on the ground reporting a good burn. Starliner is now on its way to White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico, and a planned touchdown at about 11 p.m. Central, midnight Eastern Time. Next up on the to-do list for tonight is the separation of the service module. With the service module's job done, it'll be disposed of over the Pacific Ocean, leaving the uncrewed crew module to carry on alone. In addition to all its other jobs, the service module has spent the flight protecting the crew module's heat shield. Jettisoning it uncovers that critical piece of equipment, allowing it to shelter the spacecraft as it begins traveling back through the Earth's atmosphere.
The crew module will then make its final attitude adjustments to make sure the heat shield is at exactly the right angle to provide that protection. And those fine-tuned adjustments are really just a strong capability of Starliner's guidance, navigation, and control system. In fact, on the 2 previous flights, Starliner made bullseye landings thanks to that system.
Starliner's maneuvering into position for that jettison at this time. Team here on the ground reporting that Starliner's in a good attitude, pointing the right direction for the service module separation.
And the service module has just jettisoned, separated, and is now falling away. It will burn up during reentry over a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. And Starliner will continue on its path to New Mexico, where the landing and recovery team is waiting for touchdown. Starliner is now angling itself and its heat shield for reentry. The entry interface is coming up in just about 10 minutes. That's the hottest part of the reentry process, with Starliner's heat shield reaching about 3,000 degrees. To protect Starliner from those heat loads, the spacecraft has what's called an ablative heat shield. The outer surface of that shield heats up to a gas, which then carries the heat away from the crew module through convection. And our team calls this process a game of threes because during entry interface, the heat shield will handle those temperatures of about 3,000 degrees, but it will convert that heat to about 300 degrees with only 3 inches of ablator. And because of this protection during this hottest part of reentry, the inside of the spacecraft remains at about room temperature. When Starliner returned from its last 2 flights, the capsules landed with 2 black stripes up the sides, indicating the heat shield was ablated as intended. So we do expect to see that again today, and the team considers that a bit of a badge of honor.
Once again, we did see Starliner deorbit or perform its deorbit burn on time at 10:17 p.m. Central Time, and then quickly turned around and jettisoned its surface module now that it has performed its duty over the course of the mission. We are still about 20 minutes away from entry interface, but things will start to happen quickly after that. About 4 minutes after we go into the entry interface, the heat from Starliner's re-entry will become so intense that the plasma will begin to form around the spacecraft, causing a blackout in communications with Starliner for about 4.5 minutes. And after that, we'll see Starliner jettison its forward heat shield that's been protecting the parachutes during re-entry. Then, when Starliner is around 30,000 feet above the ground, the spacecraft's parachute sequence will begin. Two drogue parachutes will start slowing Starliner down, and then they'll detach, and 3 main parachutes will deploy and inflate. At about 3,000 feet off the ground, the base heat shield jettisons, exposing the airbags, and then at touchdown, those airbags absorb the initial force of landing, cushioning the spacecraft for a soft, safe return to Earth. Currently, Starliner is about 213 miles above the South Pacific Ocean. It's just past the southernmost portion of this final orbit, coming around the southern coast of Australia, and now is going to begin making its way northward towards the west coast of the United States for that landing at 11 p.m. Central Time, midnight Eastern Time at White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. Again, we've had the deorbit burn that took place just as planned at 10:17, a 59-second burn that changed the Starliner speed by about 290 miles per hour, 130 meters per second. That made way for the service module separation, and the next milestone we'll be watching for is the entry interface coming up around 10:45. Still about 10 minutes away. Live view here of the recovery forces staged near the landing site, ready to move in once Starliner touches down. We are taking off milestones as expected for that 11 p.m. Central, midnight Eastern, or 10 p.m. Mountain Time touchdown today in New Mexico.
Again, Starliner performed its deorbit burn about 12 minutes ago. The thrusters performed nominally, and the flight home is going smooth.
We're still about 14 minutes away from the entry interface, which is our next milestone. I think I said earlier that we were 10 minutes away. That was a mistake. But about 14 minutes from now, we'll be experiencing the atmosphere for the first time since Starliner launched. And since we do have a little time, we're going to check back in with the landing team. Leah and Josh, how are things going out there?
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, that was a great view of the landing convoy all lined up. I was just watching some of the Gold team members getting suited up. As you mentioned earlier, that's going to be the first team to come in and inspect the vehicle. They're sniffing for those hypergalls or any of those dangerous fumes before the rest of the teams get the go to move in and approach the capsule. Of course, it's kind of a waiting game right now as we are still waiting to spot Starliner coming from the southwest. So a lot of us are outside of the convoy right now and keeping our eyes on the skies.
Yeah, that's right. We've got about just under probably 36 vehicles all lined up in 3 rows, just waiting to get that touchdown signal. Again, going through that convoy list that you guys went through already so well. Behind that Gold team, after Starliner is declared safe, the Silver team moves in and they do the electrical grounding. They'll also stabilize the vehicle just in case the airbags start deflating. We make sure that the hatch has a good stable orientation for Red team to come in, and they're the ones with the hatch orientation. And once the Red team establishes hatch access, actually the Silver team has a fun job tonight in the dark. They're going to go start looking for the pieces that came off of Starliner, those heat shields, some of those lids from those parachute mortars. And then after that, after Red team has hatch access and opens up the hatch, NASA's ISS program folks are going to come in for the cargo inspection.
So again, we are expecting to start seeing Starliner coming across the horizon around the time that entry interface begins. But until then, just wanted to give you guys a hit from the landing site and the latest that we have going on here. So we'll toss it back over to you in Mission Control, Houston.
Thanks so much, Leah and Josh. We are watching for that entry interface as well. We're now about 12 minutes away. Starliner continuing to make good progress following in that 10:17 p.m. Central Time deorbit burn.
Again, we're looking at the landing and recovery team set up at the holding zone there at White Sands. Josh and Leah are embedded with that convoy, and they will make a very strategic move toward the spacecraft after touchdown, first stopping at about the 500-foot mark, and then they'll get the go to move forward to the 150-foot mark, and then once the vehicle is considered safe, they will move in.
With the deorbit burn complete and the service module separated, the spacecraft's heat shield is now exposed and ready to begin experiencing the atmosphere again. The Starliner is going to make some final attitude adjustments that keep that heat shield pointing at exactly the right angle.
And next up after that is entry interface, again, just coming up in a few minutes. At 400,000 feet above Earth, Starliner faces temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit from the plasma created by air friction around the spacecraft. But Starliner can handle that heat with its heat shield, which is made of an ablative material designed to keep the inside of the spacecraft at about 70 degrees.
A few minutes later, Starliner will experience an expected blackout in communications, and that will last for about 4.5 minutes. At 30,000 feet and just 11 minutes before landing, Starliner jettisons its forward heat shield, exposing the spacecraft's parachute system. Then 2 drogue chutes will deploy, increasing drag and significantly slowing down Starliner. Then 3 pilot parachutes will pull out the main chutes, allowing the spacecraft to continue its slow and steady descent for another 8,000 feet towards the landing zone.
And once the main parachutes are fully inflated, Starliner's bucket handle releases. And what that does is it just basically levels out the spacecraft ahead of touchdown. And then the base heat shield that protected Starliner through reentry will separate at about 3,000 feet, uncovering the landing airbags. Those airbags, of course, will fill with nitrogen, allowing for Starliner to land softly and safely there in the sand.
Less than 10 minutes to go now before we do get to that entry interface point, and now just 24 and a half minutes away from the landing at White Sands Space Harbor. Everything's pretty quiet in the room, which is a good sign. Things are continuing to go smoothly as Starliner begins making its way back to Earth.
You're taking a look there at Flight Directors Rick Henfling on the left, speaking with Mike Lammers on the right. Rick is the flight director for this landing operation. Mike is weather flight director. They are tag teaming this operation.
Team has been keeping a close eye on weather at the landing site, but everything looks pretty good for tonight's touchdown.
Yeah, about 79 degrees Fahrenheit out there. They reported 10 miles of visibility. The winds are within the limits, so we are looking good for a touchdown. Coming up right about 11 o'clock p.m. Central Time.
Seven minutes to go now in tool entry interface, and then that intense heating will start about 2 minutes after we do begin the interface. That'll last about 4.5 minutes, during which time we'll be in a blackout. Starliner is currently about 130 miles, 149 miles rather, above the Pacific Ocean, heading northward towards the western coast of the United States, and it's touchdown in New Mexico.
We're taking a look here at the landing trajectory. There on the left of your screen, you can see that line that crosses over the Baja Peninsula, and that is the track Starliner will take as it makes its way into New Mexico. As it gets closer to the ground, people living in the area might get a bright shot of Starliner coming back through the atmosphere and landing there in White Sands, New Mexico.
You can also see there in the center of the screen the to-do list, basically, before we do get to landing. The service module separations highlighted in green because that one's already taken place. And next up is the entry interface, about 5 minutes away from now.
And flight controllers here in the room are reporting good attitude for that entry interface coming up again in just under 5 minutes.
2.5 minutes left before Starliner begins to feel the effects of the Earth's atmosphere again. Everything continuing to go smoothly. Flight controllers here in the room are quiet as they're working through their steps, but all going well so far. Starliner is in position to begin experiencing that heat from re-entry. Now less than 100 miles above the Earth and heading towards the Baja Peninsula. We'll be flying over that before landing in New Mexico. Just 17 minutes to go until landing. Less than a minute now until we begin entry interface. Again, about 2 minutes after entry interface starts, we'll begin seeing the heating really get intense, and we'll go into a 4.5 minute blackout. Team here in the ground reporting entry interface has begun. They're seeing good range. Seeing another view from the landing site, or the teams getting ready to move out to the landing site here. A little better idea from this view of exactly how dark it is out there with all the lights of the vehicle shining. A minute and a half until we move into the blackout period for Starliner. And 14.5 minutes until we land in White Sands, New Mexico.
The Starliner enters Earth's atmosphere at 17 times the speed of sound, which could create a sonic boom for folks living in the area. It will then be slowed down by parachutes to a speed very similar to what you might experience while going down an elevator inside a high-rise building. The vehicle then comes to a safe, comfortable stop at landing.
.30 seconds now until the blackout period begin. Due to the compression of friction and friction of the air, the molecules generate a very hot plasma that causes the red-orange glow you often see appear in post-flight imagery on many spacecraft. Although we won't get to see that tonight, it will happen. It causes an expected communication dropout. This one will last 4.5 minutes as the vehicle goes through a time when plasma interferes with the satellite signal. We expect that blackout to end around 10:52 p.m. Central.
Well, this is also the time that I mentioned earlier where a Starliner in the past 2 flights has gotten that black mark along the sides of it, and that just really proves to our team that the ablative heat shield or the ablative material around Starliner is doing its job, and the heat shield is pushing that plasma away.
It's blackout time again. Lasts about 4.5 minutes. We've got about 3.5 left of it. After that, the milestones we'll be watching for include forward heat shield jettison at 10:56 when Starliner is about 4.3 miles above the Earth. Very soon after that, almost immediately, drogue chutes deploy. Those give a little bit of an initial slowdown to the vehicle before the really large main parachutes deploy. That happens when the Starliner is about 2.5 miles above the Earth. This is a live view from the International Space Station where we're able to get a view of Starliner's track as it comes in. We are now less than 10 minutes away from landing at the White Sands Space Harbor, scheduled for 11 p.m. Central. Also getting reports that the WB-57 is also able to see Starliner now as it begins coming in for its landing. We've still got just about a minute left to go before Starliner comes out of its blackout period. And this is a view from the WB-57, one of NASA's aircraft that is at the landing site, has been staged and ready to pick Starliner or pick up the view of Starliner as it comes in, and that is what we are seeing now.
And they're filming this video from about 16,000 feet.
The WB-57 should continue to give us a view until the drogue parachutes deploy, and then we hope to pick it up with the Cessna that is also in the area.
And flight controllers here in the room are reporting that we are out of that blackout period and everything is looking good. Starliner remaining nominal as she returns to Earth.
Again, this is a view from the WB-57.
Starliner showing a beautiful streak across the sky as she returns to White Sands, New Mexico. We're about 3 minutes away from the forward heat shield jettisoning. That's the next milestone we're looking for.
Starliner is currently about 27 miles above the Earth, and the team at White Sands reporting that they have seen it. We got a tally hole from them reported remotely.
That means they are seeing Starliner from the ground there in New Mexico.
This view is coming from the Cessna that's also in the area, picking up Starliner now from its lower altitude, about 6,000 feet above, whereas the WB-57 is about 16,000 feet up. We are now just 6 minutes and 22 seconds away from landing. We should also just be a couple minutes away from the forward heat shield jettison, which will bring on the drogue parachute deploy, followed by the main parachutes.
And the strobe lights on Starliner are now on. Starliner is now over the landing site, and that strobe light will help the teams actually track Starliner on the ground because it is very dark out there.
Now about 12 miles above the landing site and just 5 minutes away from landing. Watching now for the forward heat shield jettison. That should be coming up, again making way for the parachute deployment.
All right, and that action you're seeing on your screen, forward heat shield and drogues out.
Really interesting view of this coming down from the WB-57. See those two drogue parachutes now deployed. They slow the vehicle down initially until it gets to a safe speed for the enormous main parachutes to follow. About 4 minutes to go until touchdown. Now back to a view from the Cessna aircraft in the vicinity of the landing site. Again, this is a view from a little lower than the WB-57 we were seeing.
The next thing we're going to see here is the 3 main parachutes come out, and everything will happen pretty quickly from that point on.
After those mains are out, we'll see the bottom heat shield that has been protecting Starliner through its journey through the atmosphere come off. That makes way for the landing airbags to deploy.
And there's the main parachutes there on your screen. We see 3 out. currently reefing.
And the teams at the landing recovery teams report that they heard the booms as those came out.
3 good mains fully open there. You can see Starliner in a slight tilt, so we're going to see the rotation handle move here shortly, and it will level out Starliner. But 3 good parachutes, looking great.
Just a little over 2 minutes until the expected landing time, and we heard the rotational handle has been released, so you can see that tilt evened out. Next up is the back heat shield jettison. And there it goes. That again makes way for the airbag inflation.
Nice to see that. You can see the airbags deploying there on your screen. Those airbags are filled with nitrogen as they guide Starliner safely back to the desert floor. Just a beautiful sight as Starliner makes its way to the sands of New Mexico. And flight controllers confirming 6 good airbags.
This view still coming to us from the Cessna. We've got just about a minute left to go until the expected touchdown. I'll be watching for that time for you.
Just about 15 seconds away from expected touchdown. You're seeing the ground there in your screen as we get closer. Touchdown. Starliner is back on Earth. That landing coming at 11:01 and 35 seconds Central Time, 10:01 and 31 seconds Mountain Time at White Sands Space Harbor at the U.S. Army's Missile Range in New Mexico. Our landing and recovery teams will now wait for clearance before making their way to the spacecraft.
One of the changes required with no crew on board is that the team here in the flight control room will be the ones to command the parachute to be cut away so that the wind doesn't pull the capsule along. But that's no problem for them. So now with Starliner down, they can begin working on some of the post-landing to-do items. Again, we saw Starliner touchdown at 11:01 p.m. Central Time. That's 1 minute after midnight Eastern Time, or 10:01 p.m. Central at the landing site in New Mexico. This is a view from the Cessna, still watching the drones slowly make their own way down. Those, of course, are the drogue parachutes that preceded the main parachutes, first slowing Starliner down before the large parachutes opened.
And really just a flawless and beautiful descent of Starliner today. Even heard some cheers and clapping in the background.
This again is the drogue parachutes still making their way to the ground after Starliner has touched down with its main parachutes. Touchdown came at 11:01 p.m. Central Time. The team here in Mission Control will be working through some post-landing steps now. View here of Starliner at its landing site in White Sands at Space Harbor. The landing and recovery teams will soon begin making its way out to them to begin recovering the spacecraft. The team here in Mission Control is polling right now to see if everybody is ready to power off the vehicle. That again is a step that the flight control team has taken over with the lack of crew on board.
Once the spacecraft is powered down, they will be transitioning control of the spacecraft over to the landing and recovery team. And it's a little difficult to see in this shot, but there is a strobe light on Starliner that will help the teams follow it out there.
And the recovery team is on the move, but I think Leah Cheshire and Josh Barrett, our colleagues out there, may be able to give us one last update. Leah and Josh, can you hear us?
Great landing of Calypso. I don't think there could be a
Brady,
better
hopefully.
birthday.
Obviously, we did have really a great show. We were able to see the cameras that you were watching too from the WB-57, from the Cessna, from the International Space Station. But
Leah, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Concur. It's been a really amazing day.
We were hearing a bit from space to ground there, but I think they've concluded, unfortunately. We'll see if we can get a recording of that for folks listening at home. But Leah, go ahead with your update.
Yeah, sorry about that. Couldn't hear that one here. So, but here
Sunny, MCCH here. Rick just wanted to offer that he's got one more hour here.
Hey, it's his birthday here.
Yeah, and that's what counts. Yeah, it was a good landing. It's pretty awesome.
You guys are the best. You are the best.
Thank you.
Sonny Williams there offering a slightly early happy birthday to Flight Director Rick Hempling. He will be celebrating his birthday on September 7th, but technically in Houston, we're still a little less than an hour away from that. They are, of course, already on September 7th at the International Space Station. But Leah, if you were still with us, we'll still take that update if you can give it to us.
Yeah, so as I was saying, we got to see the capsule and the plasma trail coming up over the mountains from the southwest. and we were all still standing outside the convoy to watch that happen. But the most unexpected part was when I could hear the main parachutes being deployed. It was very faint, just a little bit of a rumble, but that strobe light really helped us identify Starliner as it was descending, and it would reflect a little bit up onto those parachutes. So we actually had a decent view as it was coming down under those chutes. And now we are actually on the drive out, and we can see the strobe light. It's giving us a great direction as we head toward the capsule.
Yeah, that's right. We are actually making our way down the former space shuttle runway, literally driving right down the middle of it. Starliner is a little bit towards the southern end, so we see that strobe kind of in the distance there. But we will make our way to the 500-foot mark, where Goal Team will move in and begin their assessments. And then once they declare that proximity operations can begin, the recovery ops will really get underway.
And with that, I think we were going to toss it back to you, Brandy and Lauren. If you don't hear from us again tonight, just wanted to say thanks for letting us be part of the broadcast and give you the perspective of all the hardworking ground teams, both NASA and Boeing, out here at White Sands in New Mexico. So with that, sending it back over to Mission Control Houston.
Thanks so much, Josh and Leah. It's great to see Starliner home, and I envy you the up-close view, but we appreciate your updates.
I do too. Starliner has returned safely. Well done to the entire team for completing the mission with a successful undocking, deorbit, and landing. Starliner has once again proven herself a safe ride to and from space. On behalf of the entire Boeing team, welcome home, Calypso.
And with that, we will also wrap up our coverage tonight. We would like for you to stay tuned for our 12:30 a.m. post-landing news conference. That is 12:30 a.m. Central Time, so about an hour and a half, a little less than an hour and a half from now, when we'll be giving you final thoughts on the activities of the night. But Starliner is home. Again, the landing came at 11:01 p.m. Central Time. And with that, we will sign off. Thank you so much for following along with us. This is Mission Control Houston.